Once again, welcome everyone. Glad to see you here for our webinar this month. Okay. So our topic this month is building on this theme of managing an online list. And our topic now is maintenance and remodeling. So kind of a play on the show This Old House, right? This old list. The good news is there are tools for you to do this kind of thing for long-term care and feeding in your list. Let's talk a little bit about that. There we go. So in our previous episodes in our series here, we've talked about how Microsoft Lists is better at sharing a list of data than Excel is. Excel is great. I'm not an Excel detractor. I love Excel. But if you're trying to share a list with a group of people, multiple editors and things like that, it's just much easier to do that online than in an Excel file. It makes it more easy to find things in the list, to have multiple editors at the same time. It's more mobile friendly. It's also easier to reuse that data in your list for other purposes using other applications in Office 365. And we're going to talk about another element of that last piece, how it opens things up for you to use other applications to leverage that. Excuse me. So no matter where you're storing a list, whether it's in Excel, in SharePoint, in SQL, no matter where you're doing that kind of thing, you're going to need to make some changes eventually. You're going to need to evolve the list. It gets down to list management, as it says in our first bullet there. You're going to have new columns that need to get added for some new requirement you didn't have previously. You're going to need to change values somewhere along the line where you need to update something. Something changes, and instead of calling it shipped, you call it completed. That's an example we'll use in our list here in a moment. Or you're going to need to clean things up. Your list gets long, it's cluttered, you want to get rid of old data or things that are no longer valid. These are common list management tasks that happen no matter where you're doing a list of data. And the good news is there's good tools for you depending on how complicated your request is at the time. Depends on which tool you'll use. So let's jump into a hands-on piece here. To start with, we're going to go into our online list. So I'm showing this in the Microsoft Lists application, which is the one that you find here in the waffle menu for Office 365. You can also find these in the SharePoint site where the site is List, but we're going to look at this through the Lists application today. Now, we have this existing list with all the columns and the conditional formatting we've created along the line. It's all here just like we've talked about in previous episodes. But let's say that we need to make a change. For example, right here, we've got a status column that's showing all of these orders in our list and showing what's their current status. And maybe for some reason, I need to change the way I'm describing these. So instead of calling the finished ones shipped, I've been asked to change this to make them say completed. So how do you do that? Well, this particular column in our list is what's called a choice column. So if I open this up, you can see these are the options that we had available for users when they're filling it out. So I could just change this one so that completed is now an option in the list. So that now if you're editing something manually, I'll open up the form here. Okay. For the status, where'd my status field go? There we go. Now completed is one of the options, right? So it's usable, it's here. Now, if you notice, that did not change all the existing values to shipped, right? It just makes completed one of the options for me going forward. So now I'm left with one of these list maintenance tasks. How do I go through and update all these existing records so that they all match? That will make my reporting easier, or other things that I'm doing will probably be easier if I make my data consistent. So how do I do that? Well, the easiest way to go about this is to go into what's called grid view. So if I click on that button up here in the toolbar, in the hero bar, you'll notice it changes it into a clickable grid that's more similar to what we would have had in Excel. And now I could do some bulk updates. Maybe I want to filter so that only the ones that say shipped are showing. There they are. Now I can change one of these to completed. And now, if you look closely, you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner of what I'm clicked on currently, there's that little handle. Those of you that are Excel fans already probably recognize that, right? The autofill handle is gold. if you're trying to do bulk updates, right? So instead of having to copy and paste, like I could do that, right? I could click on this one, I could Control C, click on the next, and Control V. I could do them one at a time, and that would work. But the fill handle, allows me to just hover over that corner, and you see how my mouse pointer changes? When I get on top of it, my mouse pointer changes to a big plus sign. And now if I click and drag down across several rows, it copies that value down into the others. It's the same trick that we have in Excel. It exists here in the online list as well. So I'm going to do that down through the rest of these options. And you notice it's a nice, quick and dirty way to do bulk updates to lots of different items that are in my list. A lot easier than editing them manually, right, one at a time, or even doing a copy-paste one at a time. This is a lot easier. I exit the grid view, and just like that, they're all here. So now it's telling me there's nothing here, because remember, I had filtered this previously based on the previous status that we had, the shipped status. So if I go to the filter, I can choose to clear my filter and apply, and there we go. Now I can see all of them. May have to refresh my screen here. There we go. Now you see the shipped has been changed to completed. So you can do quick and easy changes just using the grid view and using that autofill trick. If you filter the list down to just the ones you want to change, you can do those quick one-time changes pretty quickly without having to leave your browser. What if you need to do something more advanced though? See, Quick Edit does have some pain points. It's not the best solution for everything. You may have noticed that when I was dragging down with a fill handle, I get down at the bottom of the screen, and it doesn't really work well dragging past that. So you wind up having to drag several times to get to the bottom of the list. My list isn't huge here, but in real life, your list will probably have hundreds, if not thousands of items in it. That's a lot of dragging. I keep going down and down with the autofill list. So large batches are a little difficult to do. They're also slow for the updates to happen. Another pain point with Quick Edit is that it's not very smart, right? It can't understand what the data is and make conditional updates for you. You know, if this value is this, then do this, right? You have to manually filter things down and then do your bulk updates that way. It's also not an easily repeatable process. Every step in there is manual, so you have to do it. You have to think your way through it every time. So if you're creating some kind of a maintenance process where every month you go through and do things, or every year, or whatever that is, you just have to manually remember how to do each one of them. So let's look at a more advanced tool that gives us a little more functionality. We're going to bring up an old school tool here, one called Microsoft Access. Back in the day, Access was a tool that got a lot of traction with power users because it allowed them to do database type things that were more advanced than what you might do in Excel. It doesn't get used nearly as often anymore, but it's still part of most Office installations. So it's likely on your computer already. If not, it's probably something you could request from your organization that just wasn't rolled out by default. That being said, this is what it looks like. Microsoft Access is an application where you can create databases. They got templates and things, or I already have a blank one created just for our demo here. I'll click on that. And a database right now is empty. There's nothing in it. But just like in Excel, you could have sheet tabs. Here, those are called tables. And notice we could create things if we wanted. You could create tables here, or I'm going to go and choose external data. I'm going to go and get the list from Microsoft List from my online one and just bring it in. Notice I could get a new data source from online. There's the SharePoint list. And it'll bring up a little wizard where I could tell it where is the site that I want to pull from. Here's my demo site right here, so I'll pick that. And then I have a choice to import it, which is snapshot, or I can link to the data, which creates a live two-way dynamic link to the data in my online list. That's the one we want, because that's the one that allows us to use Access to manage the data that we have stored online. So if I click Next, it'll talk to that site. It'll show me all of the lists and libraries that are available in that site. Here's the one that we're using in our demo, our sales tracking list. I'll click OK. And what it will do is it will talk to SharePoint in the background, to Microsoft List, and it'll pull that data up. You notice the sales tracking list now shows up here. Here it is in columns and rows, looking much more like a desktop application. more similar to what you might have seen in Excel in the past. We also automatically got another list. This is a list of users that comes from the site. And the reason that's helpful is because we have at least one column in here that is allowing us to pick a user for our approvers, right? So now we have that available to us as a dropdown. So you can edit data in this. We mentioned before, I'm going to go ahead and enable my content. Okay. We mentioned that this is a two-way link. Excel is one way, right? So if you export your online list into Excel, it's great for slicing and dicing and reporting. We talked about that in a previous episode. But it's one way. You can't update the list data from Excel. You just pull it down. Access will go both directions. So if I wanted to come through and make some changes, if I wanted to change the approver for some of these, I could do that. Like, for instance, here's another user in my demo environment here. Edit user, there's a design user. I could assign one to Asif. Okay. So I could do this, and it all happens automatically in the background. So some people like doing it just for that reason. They can come in, they're more comfortable making their edits in here. But there's better things we can do. Say, for instance, that we wanted to do some management that we want to make a little more repeatable. It is possible for us to create not just tables where data is stored, but also queries, like it says here, where we go and ask it to show us just a subset of data and maybe manage that subset of data. So I'm going to make a query in Design View. It gives us this design canvas. If you've not been in Access before, this may look unfamiliar, but don't worry, it's actually relatively easy to do basic things in here. This is one of those tools that you can do relatively easy things, or you can get very, very advanced if you have the interest in doing so. I'm just going to drag in. I can drag it from over here or from my table list. I'm going to drag the table in so that I can query from that table. I can make it bigger so I can read the columns that are in the table here. Let's say that I wanted to make a query that showed me just the orders that are older than 1 year. Maybe I'm going to do some list cleanup in here. So I could look at the order date. I could view it. You'll see that it's querying just the order date column, right? I don't get all those other columns that I don't care about for this operation. I just get that. So I could do that and make edits here in the query too. If for some reason I needed to come in and manually edit things, just like you could do it in the table, you can do that in the query too. So if I wanted to change this to December 23rd, that works. I can do that. We're interested in not doing things manually though, right? We want to learn how can I go and find things that are just older than 1 year? Well, you notice there is a line here in my grid that's called criteria. So I can put some criteria in here that say less than, which means earlier than in dates, right? So I could say less than, today is July 7th. I'll say last year. Helps if I type it correctly. And press the enter key. And you'll notice it automatically puts some characters around it to help it understand that this is a date. It's not just text or a number that I'm typing in here. And now if I view this, notice now I get a smaller list of records. I only get the ones that match that. So if I wanted to see exactly what we're doing, I could apply a sort here. It says show them to me in ascending date order. And now I can see this is starting in January. It goes all the way to July 4th, but I don't get anything after that because my criteria said only show me things that are less than or earlier than July 7, 2020. Okay. So criteria, this little grid down here at the bottom allows you to do things like sorting and filtering. And then if you save the query, you don't have to remember how to do all those things again, right? Last year's orders. Okay. Now I get it over here. This is where you get that idea of being repeatable, right? I can open that query again anytime I want. Now let's look how to make it do some work for us. Don't just show us the data. Let's look at how to make it do the work. Let's say that I wanted to clean these orders out of my list. You notice up here when we're in Design View, by the way, there are two views here, right? We have Design View, which is what we're looking at, or we have the data view here that shows us the data that's returned by the query. This little button up here allows us to go back and forth. Okay. Let's turn this into what's called a delete query. So a delete query is different originally we had a select query, but this one is going to take some action for us. Instead of just showing us records, it's going to do the thing we're asking it to do. We could append records, we could update records, we could do any of that. We're going to delete them though. Now to delete it, we need to tell it where from. Notice that deleting shows us this is a where column because we're using criteria. So we're saying delete things where the date is earlier than July 7th. But we also need a column here that says from. See the where and the from? If you see, there's an asterisk up here that represents the entire row. I put that in here. I now say delete things from that entire row where the order date is less than that. Viewing just lets me preview. Okay. But running actually goes to do the step, to do the operation. Now, Access gives me a warning. It wants to make sure that I know what I'm doing here because this is a power tool. Right? So yes, I'm sure. I have no fear. It tells me I'm going to delete 23 rows from the specified table. I'm going to say, yes, I want to do that. And it's going to go through and try to delete those rows for me. This was not very big. In real life, again, you may be deleting hundreds of rows from it. So this one completed pretty quickly. If I go back and look at my sales list here, and if now I sort by the order date, you'll see that now all those earlier records are gone. I only have ones that are after July now. So you see, Access gives us a pretty quick way to create a query that automatically makes changes to our data in the SharePoint list. If I go back to the browser and I refresh here, you'll see that we have a smaller list of records now, and that again, all those records from earlier are gone. Let's look at one other kind of change we could make. Maybe we don't want it to delete records. Maybe what we want to do is change records. So as an example, let's say that I wanted to take all of our records. Let's close this query. Let's make another one. Create a query in Design View. I'm going to put this on the sales tracking list again. Maybe this time I want to update the name of the sales rep for all of my orders in Asia. Maybe we had some turnover. We've assigned a new sales rep to be the rep for the Asia region, and I just want to reassign all the orders to the new sales rep. So I need a couple of fields here to do that. I'll need the region field and the sales rep field. Notice they show up in my list down here. I'm going to choose to sort by the region. Ascending sounds good. I'm going to view this, and there they are. Out of the records remaining in my list currently, I have 3 of them that are in Asia right now, a bunch in Europe and North America. So let's say that I want to change all of these manually. Of course, there's only 3 of them. I could do it manually here. But let's say that I want to do it automatically. How do I do that? Well, you remember our buttons up here that turn this into an action query instead of a select query. We're going to choose the one called Update. When you choose Update, look again in our grid down here at the bottom. We still have criteria. So I could say that my criteria here is Asia. Okay. Now, if I view it again, we'll see that well, I haven't told it to update anything yet. That's why it's giving me an error. But I'm filtering for just Asia. And then let's update here. So let's say that I wanted to put in the name of my new sales rep. If I want to view it first, it finds the 3 records for me, right? We have it configured to find only the records for Asia and to update the value in the sales rep column to be Beyonce instead of whatever it was before. Now, if I choose to run this file, it's going to give me the warning, are you sure? Yes. It tells me I'm going to update 3 rows. Yes, I want to do that. And it goes and does the change for me. If I come back into my list and look at it, again, if I filter, let's say that I only want to see Asia. There. Notice they all say Beyonce. If I go back to my browser, you'll see that the same change shows there as well. I will refresh. And again, if I filter for just Asia, or I'll just sort, they'll come to the top, right? 3 Asia ones here, all say Beyonce, right? Bulk management of your data is pretty quick and easy to do with a tool like Access. So let's review a little bit. we mentioned that you have the edit and grid view option here if you just need to make quick and dirty one-time edits in bulk. Works pretty well. You can make changes. You could filter the list down so only the relevant records are showing, and then you could use your autofill handle to apply it to many rows at once. That works very easily and very quickly with nothing else except your browser. The other option we talked about was in Microsoft Access. We chose it by going to external data. We can choose to do a new data source from a SharePoint list. And that allows us to have an editable copy of our SharePoint list here in Access. Then we have the ability to create queries that automatically go and apply filtering and sorting and show us just the columns we want to see. And then we can even configure those queries to make updates and deletes and create new records for us. So you probably get the sense of how many things you could use this for. What's nice too is the ability to save all of these steps that you create. So again, this one would be Reassign Asia orders. Right? And you can run them again anytime you want in whatever order you want. Makes it very easy to automate, semi-automate some of these processes that you may need to do repeatedly. Let's go back to our slide deck for just a moment. And let's just point out that you can do a lot more with Access. We looked at something that just scratches the surface, really. But in addition to this idea of deleting and updating, you can also append new records. So say, for instance, you want to query them from one list, and then you want to push them into another, right? You can do that with Access. Connect to the two lists, use a query to find the right records, and then append them to another list. You can archive to an offline list. We looked at how you can connect Access to your live SharePoint or your Microsoft list data. But if you just need to clean out those, like those records I did that were a year old, you could create a little local copy in Access that is a local table that's not online at all. And you could pull those records out and put them in your local list. That way, if you ever need to restore them, you can, but they're out of your live data. You can create a push button process that combines multiple of these update queries in a particular sequence. Access has the concept of macros and forms you can create that have buttons in them. So you could create a process that you're going to hand off to another user that has no idea how Access works or how lists work, that just comes in and clicks the button, and it runs these 4 queries in order to make this process work. Lots of things you can do with Access. Let's talk a little bit about how you can get help afterwards. Normally, we have a slide in here that shows you where you can find help in the VisualSP Help tab. Access is a little different. Access isn't in the browser. It's one of the desktop applications that comes with Microsoft Office 365. So there is no help tab for VisualSP there. There are not help items that get displayed in the tab. However, if you want to branch into Access and use that, we have a lot of experience doing that sort of things at VisualSP. So if you want some follow-up help in a one-on-one nature, we offer that. You can buy yourself like a little gift card of just consulting hours that can be used, chunks of 10, 20, or 40. And we can get with you on something that meets your schedule and your needs, and either just do some training or more likely help you accomplish something in real life. And then when we're done, you have the finished database that you can use again and again later. So remember, that is available. We are happy to do that kind of work with you. Now let's take just a moment and let me look at our question panel and see if we have anything that's been typed as the webinar has been going. There's nothing there. Please feel free to do that in the GoToWebinar tools. You should see a place where you can ask questions. I'm happy to spend a few minutes answering those. We have just a few minutes left in our scheduled time if you have them. While we're waiting and giving you an opportunity to type, I'll talk about a couple of other things that people have asked me about Access in the past. One of them is the thing we alluded to earlier, that I don't have access on my machine. How do I get it? It is a product that has to be licensed, but in many cases, it is part of the Office license you have already that gives you Word and Excel and PowerPoint. It may be that your company doesn't install it by default, but it might be if you request it that you can get it pushed to you, or have someone visit and install it for you. Some organizations, that's an easy request. Others, it's difficult, but it's worth a question if you don't have it. Many people do have it, though. It's just installed by default with everything else. They've just never noticed it. They've never had a reason to use it in the past. So you may find that that's the case. Here's a question for us. Well, items in a list go to the recycle bin if you ran a query to delete items through Access. That is a fantastic question. Let me show you exactly what he's talking about. So remember, we've been interacting with our list here in Microsoft Lists. But remember, it is in SharePoint as well. That's where it's really stored. And SharePoint has a recycle bin where when you delete things, they go there first. So what's the easiest way for me to get to this list in SharePoint? One of the quick ways is up here on the gear button if you choose to go to list settings, or the recycle bin is listed right here too. We'll just choose that one since our question's about recycle bin. But list settings will get you into the site as well. The recycle bin, when you click on it, notice we come in here and all those records that got deleted do show up right here in the recycle bin. Because ultimately what Access was doing is just performing the action you would have done in the browser manually. So all those do show up and they are accessible for you. A follow-up question that usually comes after that one is how long do they stay there, right? And the answer by default is 30 days for the recycle bin. There is a longer one that your admins may be able to pull from as well. But 30 days in most cases is enough for you to notice that, wait a second, where did those 500 records go, right? So in here, if you decided you needed those to come back, you could select some of them or all of them, right? See if there's anything else I don't want to pick here. I'll ignore these blank ones at the bottom. But if I wanted to restore these items, I could just select the right ones, click the restore button. Okay. And if I go back into my list, let's sort it again here so we can see them. Ta-da! Now all the old ones are back. Great question. Thank you for that. All right, that brings us just about to the end of our time. Thank you, everyone, very much. Please do remember, we are here to help. If there's something else we can do, feel free to reach out. I'll bring the slide back up in case you need to get a screenshot of that. Okay. You can contact me, Eric, at VisualSP.com if you need more information about getting further help. Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you next month.